The water is black glass under the Queensland moon, 18 inches deep. Safe, they think. Safe enough to cool burning skin after hours of dancing, after bottles emptied and laughter shared. But in the Daintree, safety is an illusion that shatters in seconds. Beryl Wruck sits on the wooden pontoon, her back to the water, talking to friends who wade nearby. Her voice carries across the creek, warm, alive, completely unaware that something ancient watches from below. Something that has waited, something that has chosen. The swirl comes without warning, violent, immediate. The woman who was laughing just moments before, gone. Not a scream, not a splash, just gone. In the silence that follows, her friends will realize they have witnessed something that will haunt the Daintree forever. They have seen Big Jim claim his prize. There are places on Earth where humans are not the apex predator, where our confidence, our technology, our supposed dominance over nature means nothing. The Daintree River system in far north Queensland is one such place. It's a primordial world where saltwater crocodiles, living dinosaurs, rule from the murky depths with the patience of stones and the strike of lightning. This is the story of Beryl Wruck, a 43-year-old postal worker whose life was measured not in years, but in the split second it took for ancient jaws to close. Her disappearance on December 21, 1985, would become more than a tragedy. It would become a warning that echoes through the mangroves to this day. Beryl Corrine Wruck lived the kind of life that small Australian towns are built on. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., she'd walk the familiar streets of Mosman, Queensland, her post bag slung across her shoulder, knowing every name on every letter, every face behind every door. The townspeople loved their postie, a woman with calloused hands and an easy smile, who remembered birthdays and always had time for a chat at the gate. She was everyone's mate, recalls longtime Mosman resident Margaret O'Sullivan. Beryl knew if your pension was late, if you were waiting for news from family down south. She cared about people, really cared. Born in 1942, Beryl had raised 3 children as a single mother, in an era when that meant twice the work for half the recognition. Her hands bore the evidence of a life spent working, small scars from paper cuts, permanent ink stains on her fingertips, skin weathered from years under the Queensland sun. But her eyes still sparkled with mischief, and at 43, she could dance until dawn and be ready for her postal rounds the next morning. The Daintree region had been her home for over a decade. She knew its moods, its seasons, its dangers. She'd grown up with stories of crocodiles, had seen the warning signs posted along waterways, had heard the tales whispered in pubs about massive salties that lurked in the rivers. But like many locals, familiarity had bred a kind of casual confidence. The creek behind her friend's house was shallow. The tide was low. They'd cooled off there before. Beryl worked 6 days a week, her route taking her through Mosman's tropical streets where bougainvillea climbed over letterboxes and the air hung thick with humidity even in December. Summer in far north Queensland was a living thing, oppressive, demanding, the kind of heat that made sensible people seek shade and water by mid-morning. For postal workers like Beryl, it meant starting before dawn and finishing by noon, then spending the afternoon recovering from the assault of the sun. Her children remember her as fiercely independent, the kind of woman who could fix a flat tire, negotiate with difficult customers at the post office, and still have energy to join friends for an evening out. She'd survived the challenges of single motherhood in the 1970s and 80s, a time when society offered little support and even less sympathy. Every bill she paid, every meal she put on the table, every school uniform she bought was earned through her own determination. In the tidal waters of the Daintree River system lived a creature that represented the absolute pinnacle of predatory evolution. Locals had named him Big Jim, but the crocodile himself needed no human designation. He was a force of nature given form, 5 meters of muscle, bone, and prehistoric instinct that had survived unchanged for over 200 million years. Saltwater crocodiles are the ultimate ambush predators, and Big Jim was a master of his craft. Weighing close to 1,000 kilograms, his massive frame moved through water with impossible grace, creating barely a ripple despite his enormous size. His eyes and nostrils protruded just above the waterline, allowing him to remain virtually invisible while monitoring every movement along the banks. Big Jim's territory encompassed several kilometers of the Daintree River system, including Barratt Creek. He knew every submerged log, every depth change, every tidal pattern. For a saltwater crocodile, territory is not just living space. It's a carefully mapped hunting ground where every variable is calculated and every advantage is preserved. The crocodile's hunting strategy relied on three elements: concealment, patience, and explosive violence. Saltwater crocodiles can remain motionless for hours, their metabolism slowing to conserve energy while they wait for the perfect opportunity. Their strike, when it comes, is faster than human reflexes can process, a sudden eruption of power that generates over 3,000 pounds per square inch of bite force. Big Jim's reputation among locals wasn't built on a single incident. For years, cattle had disappeared from waterside properties. Dogs that ventured too close to the creek had vanished without a trace. Experienced fishermen had reported glimpses of a massive tail disappearing beneath the surface. The signs had been there for anyone willing to see them. In the months leading up to that fatal December night, Barratt Creek had whispered its warnings through a series of incidents that locals either dismissed or failed to connect to the growing danger lurking beneath its surface. 3 weeks before Beryl's disappearance, a local farmer reported finding strange drag marks along the creek bank, parallel grooves in the mud that could only have been made by something massive pulling itself from the water. When questioned by neighbors, the farmer shrugged it off as probably a large monitor lizard, despite the fact that the tracks were far too wide and the impressions too deep for any lizard. "We all knew there were crocs in the system," recalls former Daintree local Tom Henderson, who lived in the area during the 1980s. "But we thought we were smart enough to avoid them. Shallow water late at night, what could go wrong? We were bloody idiots." The week before the attack, a local fisherman reported hooking something enormous in the deeper pools of Barratt Creek that stripped his line and bent his rod beyond repair. He described a sudden, violent resistance that nearly pulled him from his boat, followed by a stillness that suggested whatever he'd hooked had simply let go rather than continuing the fight. Even more ominous was the disappearance of a large domestic pig from a property adjacent to the creek. The animal, which had been securely penned the night before, was found missing the following morning with no signs of a break-in or struggle at the pen. The only clue was a trail of disturbed vegetation leading toward the water. December 20th, 1985, 11:47 p.m. The barbecue is winding down, but the heat hasn't broken. Even at midnight, the temperature hovers near 28 degrees Celsius, and the humidity makes the air feel solid. Beryl laughs at something her friend Sarah says about a difficult customer at the post office, wiping perspiration from her forehead with the back of her hand. "God, it's hot," Beryl says, fanning herself with a paper plate. The creek beckons from beyond the house lights, its dark surface promising relief from the oppressive heat. Someone suggests a swim, not for the first time that evening, but now the idea has real appeal. December 21st, 1985, 12:15 a.m. The group makes their way down to the wooden jetty that extends about 3 meters into Barratt Creek. The structure is solid, but shows signs of tropical weather: warped boards, rust stains from corroded bolts, gaps between planks where the wood has shrunk. Beryl tests the water temperature with her toe. "Perfect," she declares, "just cool enough to feel good." Her 3 companions, Sarah, Mike, and Janet, follow her lead. The creek bottom is soft mud mixed with decomposed leaves, the kind of organic matter that makes the water rich with marine life. Perfect crocodile habitat, though none of them think about that. 12:31 a.m. Beryl climbs back onto the jetty, saying she wants to dangle her feet in the water while staying dry above the waist. She positions herself at the edge of the wooden platform, her back to the creek, facing her friends who continue to wade in the shallows. "Beryl, you should see your hair in this humidity," Janet teases. "Looks like you've been electrocuted." "Thanks a lot," Beryl laughs, running her fingers through her damp hair. "Good thing the post office doesn't have a dress code for humidity days." She dangles her legs in the water, kicking gently and creating small ripples that spread outward into the darkness. To any crocodile watching from the deeper water, these movements would register as distress signals from injured prey. 12 to 44 am. Beryl shifts position on the jetty, turning slightly to better participate in the conversation. The movement causes her legs to create more disturbance in the water, and she inadvertently moves closer to the edge of the platform. "I should probably get out soon," she says. "Early postal round tomorrow, and this heat is going to make it brutal." The words are casual, part of the natural rhythm of a social evening winding down. None of them realize they're about to become part of history. 46 am. In the deeper water beyond the immediate area of human activity, Big Jim makes his decision. The crocodile has been observing for nearly an hour, calculating distances and timing with the patience of a creature that has perfected ambush hunting across millions of years of evolution. The attack begins with a movement so subtle that human senses cannot detect it. The crocodile's powerful tail begins the propulsion sequence that will launch nearly 1,000 kilograms of predator through the water at speeds approaching 40 kilometers per hour. 12:46, 17 am. Beryl is mid-sentence, telling her friends about Christmas plans with her children, when the water around her legs suddenly changes. What happens next occurs faster than human reflexes can process, but survivor accounts later piece together a sequence that took less than 3 seconds from beginning to end. "There was this massive swirl," Mike would later tell police. "The water just exploded upward. I saw Beryl go up in the air and over like she'd been launched by a catapult. No scream, no sound. She was just gone." The physics of a crocodile attack are brutal and precise. Big Jim's jaws, capable of generating over 3,000 pounds per square inch of pressure, close around Beryl's legs and lower torso in a grip that no human strength could break. 12:46, 20 am. The water settles. 3 people stand frozen in 18 inches of creek water, staring at the spot where their friend had been sitting just seconds before. The jetty is empty. The surface of the creek shows no sign of disturbance, except for expanding ripples that spread outward and then disappear into the darkness. "Beryl?" Sarah calls tentatively. "Beryl, where are you?" Silence. Not even the sound of splashing or struggle that might indicate someone fighting to surface. Just the soft lapping of water against the jetty posts and the distant sound of night insects in the rainforest canopy. Emergency response. The search that found nothing. 12:58 am. First emergency call. Sarah's hands shake as she dials 00 from the house phone, the old rotary mechanism seeming to take forever to complete each number. When the emergency operator answers, her words come out in a rush that barely makes sense. "A crocodile. My friend. She's gone. Barratt Creek. It happened so fast." Emergency dispatch protocols in far north Queensland have specific procedures for crocodile attacks, but they're rarely implemented. Most calls turn out to be false alarms or cases of missing persons who surface unharmed within hours. 1:15 am. Police response. Senior Sergeant Van Tim receives the call at his home in Mossman, the radio crackling with urgency that cuts through his sleep. Crocodile attacks are every Queensland police officer's nightmare. Time-critical emergencies where rescue is rarely possible, but the attempt must be made with maximum resources. Possible crocodile fatality at Barratt Creek, the dispatch report states. Adult female, 3 witnesses, attack occurred approximately 1 hour ago. Tim knows the location. He knows the creek. He also knows that if a large saltwater crocodile has taken someone, the chances of recovery are virtually zero. 1:33 am. First responders arrive. 2 police vehicles and a local volunteer fire brigade unit reach the property, their spotlights cutting harsh shadows across the tropical vegetation. The witnesses are huddled together on the house veranda, wrapped in towels despite the heat, their faces showing the kind of shock that comes from witnessing something the human mind was unprepared to process. Sergeant Tim interviews each witness separately, their accounts remarkably consistent despite the traumatic nature of the event. Massive swirl in the water. Beryl lifted and thrown. Complete disappearance in less than 3 seconds. No screams, no struggle, no sign of survival. 5:15 a.m. Media arrival. The first television crew arrives as dawn breaks over the Daintree, their satellite truck struggling down the narrow dirt road that leads to the property. The story of Beryl Wruck's disappearance is about to become national news, transforming a personal tragedy into a public debate about crocodile management and human safety. 2:00 p.m. Search suspension. After 12 hours of intensive searching involving over 50 personnel, multiple aircraft and specialized equipment, police officially suspend active rescue operations. The decision is purely procedural. Everyone involved knows that Beryl Wruck died in the first moments of the attack. "We've conducted the most comprehensive search possible given the circumstances," Senior Sergeant Tim tells assembled media. "Unfortunately, we have found no trace of Mrs. Wruck, and we must now treat this as a fatality investigation." The news of Beryl Wruck's disappearance sent shockwaves far beyond the tropical boundaries of far north Queensland. Within 48 hours, her name was front-page news across Australia, transforming a local tragedy into a national conversation about human settlement in Crocodile country. Television crews descended on Mossman like scavengers, their satellite trucks clogging the town's narrow streets, as reporters competed for exclusive interviews with anyone who had known Beryl or witnessed the attack. "Croc hell! Postal worker vanishes in jaws of monster," screamed the front page of Brisbane's Courier Mail. The accompanying photograph showed Barratt Creek looking deceptively peaceful in the morning light, giving readers no indication of the violence that had occurred beneath its calm surface. The Queensland government faced immediate pressure to respond to what critics called a predictable tragedy. Environmental groups argued that better public education about crocodile dangers could have prevented Beryl's death, while rural constituencies demanded more aggressive crocodile management programs. Public pressure culminated in an official decision to locate and remove the crocodile believed responsible for Beryl's death. Queensland Parks and Wildlife officers launched Operation Big Jim, a systematic effort to capture or kill the massive saltwater crocodile that had terrorized the Daintree region. 3 months after Beryl's death, a massive saltwater crocodile measuring 5.2 meters was captured in a trap near Barratt Creek. Wildlife officers could never definitively prove this was Big Jim, but circumstantial evidence suggested they had found their target. Today, nearly 40 years after Beryl Wruck vanished beneath the dark waters of Barratt Creek, her story continues to echo through the mangroves and tidal channels of far north Queensland. The warning signs are everywhere now, bright yellow metal plaques that pierce the tropical landscape with stark messages about crocodile danger. Beryl's story has become part of Australian folklore, told and retold in pubs and around campfires, as a cautionary tale about the price of complacency in crocodile country. But those who knew her resist the transformation of her life into myth. She was not a symbol or a statistic. She was a woman who delivered mail, raised children, and danced until dawn on tropical nights. The debate about human coexistence with apex predators continues across northern Australia. Crocodile numbers have recovered dramatically since protection began in 1971. And encounters with humans have increased proportionally. Each attack reignites arguments about culling, relocation, and the balance between conservation and human safety. But Beryl's legacy extends beyond policy debates. Her death marked a watershed moment in Australian environmental consciousness. The recognition that sharing the continent with ancient predators requires constant vigilance, respect for natural systems, and acceptance that humans are not always at the top of the food chain. On quiet nights in the Daintree, when the tide is low and the water runs still, locals sometimes hear sounds from the creeks that make them pause and listen. A splash that seems too large for a fish, a ripple that moves against the current, the soft scrape of something massive pulling itself onto a muddy bank. What matters is that somewhere in the dark water, Big Jim's descendants patrolled territories claimed millions of years before humans walked the earth. They hunt with patience perfected across geological ages, strike with speed that defies human reflexes, and remind us that some of nature's lessons are written in blood on dark water. Beryl Wruck learned that lesson in the last 3 seconds of her life, but her story continues to teach it to anyone wise enough to listen. In crocodile country, respect for the water isn't just good advice. It's the difference between life and death. The creek still runs dark behind the lights of human habitation. The crocodiles are still waiting, and Beryl's story echoes in the splash of every careless footstep that ventures too close to the edge of their ancient domain.